So my name is Ian Roxburgh. I'm the game director for the Total War Warhammer trilogy.
Hi, I'm Oscar Anderson, a senior battle designer on the Total War Warhammer III dev team.
So I'm interested to know. I mean, obviously this has been a trilogy of games, but what made you decide to go with it being a trilogy as opposed to like a game as a service, and not just release factions like you have in the past with Total War and Total Warhammer 2?
Yeah, I mean, when we first started looking at the Warhammer Fantasy universe, we realized we certainly couldn't do it in one game because there was so much incredible content, such a wealth of brilliant stuff we wanted to cover, and we knew we wanted to do a game that contained everything at the same time, and the only way really to do that was to break it up into chunks and to be able to bring lots of big new features out as we went along, and also as you go along to bring a combined map in that brought the content from the games that we've made so far together. As you see, the combined map with Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2. And the ultimate vision was always to do the three main games that are just brilliant games and experiences in their own right, but that would also combine to become one single game at the end with all that content in it, because that would always have been the game that we wanted to play and that we knew our fans would want to play. So it was just the common sense way of being able to divvy up that massive brilliant content and do it justice step by step in a way that would work and bring everything out to the right level of detail in the end. And it's worked out really well so far. I mean, people have really loved the games individually because they've all got masses of content in their own right and masses of new features, but when you put them together as well, they just augment each other, and being able to deliver that combination of the two games for free was really great for us. And when we released the combined map of all three games after the release of Warhammer 3, it's just going to be the ultimate massive campaign map that everyone would have wanted from the start. And to be able to give that away free to the fans as well is a real big thing for us as well, to be able to repay some of that faith the fans have shown and enthusiasm they've shown for the three games up until then. So yeah, it just made common sense to do it this way in order to be able to deliver that ultimate experience at the end.
Have you guys done the entirety of the old world map of Warhammer at this point, or are there still small patches that you've missed? Because I feel like you've covered the gamut for all the areas and locations of big continents.
Yeah, we've pretty much covered everything. I mean, there are little nooks and crannies, I guess, here and there that that you could possibly find somewhere, but ultimately all the major areas of the Warhammer Fantasy universe have been covered, and Warhammer 3 just extends further east, and also, as you may know, includes the Chaos realms for the first time as well. So not only are we pretty much covering the entire landmass now with the third game as well, but we're actually going into a different dimension and exploring all the incredible gameplay and visuals and spectacle that going into the realms of Chaos provides. And that's a really, really interesting challenge and an exciting area of the game to work on.
Well, Total War fans, like for online competitive enthusiasts, can Total War fans bring in their favorite faction from 1 or 2 and play it in 3's online mode?
The older Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 factions will be available in multiplayer at the same time as the Immortal Empires campaign releases. So not on launch, but sometime after.
Oh, that's great. As a battle designer, how do you work with Games Workshop? Because a lot of these models and units have never really been seen before, animated and moving. Is that difficult for you to figure that out and see what they do and see how the mechanics work on the tabletop and how they translate to your battle system?
So I think there's actually a couple of questions there. So first is just about the question of, we work together with Games Workshop to kind of figure out how the model should look like, and we have a process of approval with Games Workshop. Then you bring in the rigging and animation team to work with the what kind of skeletons the you're gonna need for the models, and then it's a lot of experimentation with by the animators to kind of trying to figure out like what kind of movement makes sense for the different monsters. Like, for example, like how does a bear attack, how does a bear run, how does an elemental bear attack and run, and we end up having lots of really wild creatures that you just kind of have to like feel your way towards like what makes sense for them. And luckily we have a very talented group of people working on that. So, and then on the design side, it is a lot of figuring out the adaptation of the Games Workshop core material of how do you translate that army book into a total war mechanic. And sometimes you can easily just quite literally just apply a rule from the tabletop into the main game or the total war game. But at times you then have to like do more of a how do you live up to the theme of the faction, or well, I think the theme is kind of like the
how do you translate what they can do into the video game space as opposed to the tabletop? But yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, what we do right at the beginning is we play the tabletop game a lot, so that we know the vibe, the feel of all of the races, from the tabletop game before we really start to translate it into a Total War equivalent, so that rather than trying to directly translate a stat or an ability, you already understand how that faction plays in the context of the other factions and where its strengths and weaknesses are. So you've got that familiarity, and at the top level, you're bringing that into a Total War context. So you look at it at that top level as well as just the detailed translation of a stat to a different stat, for example. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. What works in the tabletop that always translates perfectly to a gaming space, especially in a real-time combat game.
Yeah,
we definitely have to do a lot of like kind of reinterpretation of like how do you maintain the spirit of it without necessarily translating it directly. I think Kislev to some degree is a trickier faction because you don't really have the models to play with, you don't have those established rules to play with. So when we were working on Kislev, it was more important to really kind of get that feel of like how does it feel to be a Kislevite warrior, what's kind of what's important for Kislev to feel like Kislev. And we very much lead heavily in towards the idea of these stout, brave defenders who are willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of the motherland and protect Kislev from chaos.
Yeah, and that's tough. It's like making an army of witch hunters. The witch hunters haven't really been a tabletop faction for like 10 years, so it's difficult. I can see that.
Yeah.
This game takes place. The campaign map takes place in the far north of the old world. Obviously, chaos is the main threat here, but will we see other factions make a guest appearance as like enemies, like the Ogre Maw tribes?
There are various sort of factions that will be occupying the map as well, but we're not talking about which factions they are at the moment, I'm afraid. So yes, there will be more factions than you would have heard of so far, but you'll have to wait till later to hear what they are, I'm afraid. So
all good.
Sorry about that.
No, you got to save something, right? That's the whole point.
There's so much stuff to talk about in the rest of this game. I can't wait till the fullness of the campaign, and we can tell you so much more as well. But yeah.
Leading into my other question, with the Chaos Demons factions being in full force here as the enemy in the narrative campaign, does that mean they're going to be a playable faction in this game as well?
What, the four Chaos factions, you mean?
Yeah, Nurgle, Zench, all them.
Yes, they'll all be playable, and they've been padded out to the extent of a full race as well. So they're we've deep dived, if you like, into the lore, and rather than sort of copying the format of the army books for the tabletop game, which combine all the Demons of Chaos into one army book, we've treated them all individually. So all the four gods are very, very distinct, very individual, not only in the way they look and the visual side of things and the unit rosters, but the way they play, both on the campaign and in the battles. So it's not just like variants of a theme with Chaos. They are all completely unique factions in their own right. So it creates a lot of variety and a lot of visual spectacle as well, because the kind of environments that you'll be fighting in when you're fighting against these kind of armies and the units you'll be fighting against is so much more extreme and wacky even than most of the factions you've seen up until now in the Warhammer trilogy. So it's a really, really varied game, and we've got so much more content in there as well, that just the landscapes you'll be visiting and the kind of cities you'll be fighting amongst, it's just way beyond any of the previous games we've made.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's mained demons in fantasy and Age of Sigmar, it's really nice to start to see on the tabletop side each faction of demon get their own book. Like, they're slowly rolling them out, and it gives them more of an identity as opposed to being mushed in one codex.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously, your creative director hinted at a god dying. I said I'm an Age of Sigmar and fantasy player, so obviously he's hinting at Sigmar maybe falling down. Are we going to witness the beginning of the end times in your Total Warhammer 3 game?
This is very much about the old world, this trilogy, and I'm not at liberty to tell you much about actually what we're covering in terms of the narrative. Yeah, we are very strongly focused on the old world, so I'll leave it at that, I'm afraid.
You're like, you gotta warn that in here. You're like, crap, he's gonna ask all the hard questions. With you guys have claimed you're having more factions or armies launching with this game than any other Total War game at launch. Is it difficult? Because the more armies you have to play against each other in an online sense, the more balancing you have to do. Is it difficult making sure that every faction feels unique and isn't overpowered or underpowered, and each has its own little twist of gameplay? Yeah,
of course it is. It is more difficult, but we've had more time and a bigger budget to be able to do that. And basically, due to the success of the first two games and the great support they've received, we've been able to just be more ambitious with this game and make sure that it's just bigger, badder, and better all round. And so, yes, of course, the more you put in, the harder it is to get all that done and to get it all balanced right. But we've got the resources to do it, and we've also gained a lot of experience through making the first two games, which really, really helps. So, yes, I guess it's more challenging, but not to the point where it's anywhere near beyond what we're capable of achieving. So it's just about, planning the project accordingly and putting more in over a longer period of time. So it's not unsurmountable by any stretch.
Also, just to address the point about how challenging it is to make them unique. I think the races or the factions that we're doing for Warhammer 3 kind of make it easy to lean into their uniqueness, because Nurgle and Khorne are very different in their flavor and the kind of units that they have available. So it's more of a balancing challenge rather than a challenge to make them asymmetric. Just the source material is just so rich and wonderful in this sense, so that each of the races is going to be very, very different from each other and will have unique mechanics to lean into. So it should be exciting.
From a design and a battle perspective, the Total War series is mainly grounded in not necessarily realism, but just real life wars, real life vehicles, battle tactics, things that happen in history. Is it? I guess the word I'm looking for is it funner to work in a fantasy world where we have more liberties with spells and vehicles and troop choices and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'll let Oscar maybe answer it in some more detail. But as from the very top level, when you're planning how Warhammer's going to work, yes, it is. It's really good fun because after 18 years of sticking with human beings that have different variations of weapons, to be able to design a system of how magic works, or how flying creatures will work, and all the crazy stuff you see throughout the three games, it is definitely really interesting and exciting to work on, and especially when you hear the fans getting very excited and being able to see sort of genuinely new battle challenges and tactics and things like that you just couldn't do in a real world setting. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and the artists particularly love working on it, as well as the designers. So all round, it's been a really exciting project, and one that people have really enjoyed working on. Oscar, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. So I think in general, as a designer, I think it is very freeing to be able to work with a different set of constraints. So with the historical title, you're very much bound to like the realism and like try to deliver that authentic experience. But with Warhammer, what is an authentic experience is very, very different. So you get to foreground, like explore new mechanics that would just be impossible in a normal Total War game or a historical Total War game, and you just get to have a lot more, I think, fun with like delivering crazy mechanics that just really help drive, this sense of fun and spectacle. But at the same time, I think a lot of the things that we are delivering in Total War Warhammer are similar to the normal Total War game or historical Total War games as well. So, it is about the formations, it is about that kind of grand scale of things. But it's just a different experience as a designer and a player.
You guys have pretty much run the gamut in terms of factions in the old Warhammer Fantasy universe. I mean, I can't think of anything that you haven't really covered yet that's not like particularly niche, like like witch hunters, like something that was very around for a very short time, doesn't really make up the glump of an army, the big but it's like better for like a side quest or like a side unit attachment. Were there any factions that you can talk about in this one that you had particularly fun experimenting with that you didn't in Warhammer 1 and 2?
From my point of view, one of the very a lot of what we've done for the last 8 years has been a hell of a lot of fun. But with Warhammer 3 particularly, working with the new content that Games Workshop have been creating alongside us as we've been making Warhammer 3 has been particularly stand out for a lot of us. So them developing Kislev and creating new content that didn't exist before, and and padding out that sort of rather sparse bit of lore around Kislev, and seeing that develop and working with them on that has been brilliant. But even more so Cathay. I mean, the Cathay faction is literally really rarely been alluded to in all of the lore up until now, and then to sit there and see Workshop and work with them while they create this whole new army book's worth of content from scratch, and to be part of that and to be able to feed into that and to be building it into a Total War framework at the same time has been a really, really exciting experience. And particularly knowing that the Warhammer fans out there are going to be really excited that this is brand new content, that it's not a case of them going, oh, this is my favorite faction and I want to see how how Creative Assembly have interpreted it in this game. They're actually going to be seeing this content for the first time, and it's genuine canon at the same time. So we're really excited to see how much the Warhammer fans are going to enjoy seeing the Cathay content and the new Kislev content. So that's been a lot of fun to work with.
Yeah, I think for me as well, Cathay has probably been probably the most fun I've had on the project. It's just come together visually and from a gameplay point of view as well. It's all coming together really nicely, and it's a fun faction to look at.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean that's the problem with when you're making a game based on a tabletop game. Like, everyone wants to see their faction, even if it's a really obscure. I remember I think it was 2, the Tomb Kings. Everyone was requesting the Tomb Kings, and that's been an army that was dead for years. I mean, their codex went into like the scroll status. They didn't get any new units, but everyone wanted to see them, and you guys ended up doing them, which is really cool.
Yeah, and that goes back to the original vision, was that we wanted to eventually do everything, and the only real way to do that was the 3 main games and all of that DLC, and bit by bit we've been able to cover most things up till now, and we'll continue to do so beyond the release of Warhammer 3 with a load of other bits and bobs that maybe our fans would have been wanting for a while, or that we've wanted. And by the end of it, this whole plan for how we'd set it out enabled us to be able to eventually cover everything and then put it into one single combined map at the end. So yeah, it's been really exciting, and we don't want to leave any stone unturned. Where there's something there that we can explore, we will.
And then my very last question, because I got to get you out of here for time, is obviously I know you can't say much about it because I already mentioned the fall of a certain deity that changes everything in the world. But is it a goal for the studio to eventually get into modern Warhammer fantasy and showcase Bone Reapers and Deepkin and all those other cool things that they've released that fit into the current lore but not the old world?
I'm really, really sorry, but I'm going to give you the answer you're going to expect, which is I'm afraid we won't be talking about anything like that today. So you'll just have to sort of wait and hear for that in the future. So I'm sorry.
I asked, right? So people be like, "What about Sigmar?" And I'll be like, "I asked." And they said. I'm just a relayer of information. All right, guys. And then when does the game come out, and when can people get their hands on it?
Well, we'll be announcing a release date at a later date as well. So we're not going to be talking about that today either. So, but I'm sure in the fullness of time you'll get all that information. So, once again, I'm sorry to not be able to let you know right now.
That's okay. Can you give me a year, next year, this year, or is it still too up in the air?
We'll tell you. We'll be fine. You'll be finding out at a later date.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to push too hard on that. Okay. So it'll be ready when it's ready.
Yes. Okay. Let's leave it at that.